He resided in the calm eye of a storm of hate. Power churned around him, within him. He did not feel as if he were drawing on the Force, using it. He felt as if he were the Force, as if he had merged with it. He had evolved. Nothing split his loyalties any longer. He served the Force and only the Force, and his understanding of it increased daily. The growing power whirling around him, leaking through the lid of his control, made the suppression of his Force signature impossible. All at once, he lowered all of the mental barriers, let the full force of his power roil around him.
"Adraas!"
he shouted, putting enough power into his voice to cause the ceiling and walls to vibrate.
"Adraas!"
He strode through the rooms and hallways of Adraas's retreat, toppling or destroying everything within reach. Antique desks, the bizarre, erotic statuary favored by Adraas, everything. He left ruin in his wake, all while shouting for Adraas to show himself. His voice rang off the walls. He rounded a corner to see a squad of 6 Imperial troopers in full armor, blaster rifles ready, the front 3 on one knee before the other 3. They had been waiting for him. His Force-enhanced reflexes moved faster than their trigger fingers. Without slowing his pace, he pulled his lightsaber into his hand and activated it as the blasters discharged. The red line of his weapon spun so fast in his hand, it expanded into a shield. 2 of the blaster shots ricocheted off his weapon and into the ceiling. He deflected the other 4 back at the troopers, putting black holes through 2 chests and 2 face masks. Another 2 strides and a lunge brought him upon the surviving 2 troopers before they could fire again. He cross-cut, spun, and cross-cut again, killing both. He deactivated his lightsaber and continued on through the manse until he reached a large central hall, perhaps 15 meters wide and 25 long. Decorative wood columns that supported upper balconies lined its length at even intervals. A pair of double doors stood on the far side of the hall, opposite those Malgus had entered. Lord Adraas stood within the open doorway. He wore a black cloak over his elaborate armor. "Malgus," Adraas said, his voice showing surprise, but his tone turning Malgus's name into an insult. "You are in the unknown regions."
"I am in the unknown regions."
Adraas understood the implication. "I knew you would come one day."
"Then you know I am here for you."
Adraas ignited his lightsaber, shed his cloak. "For me, yes," he chuckled. "I understand you, Malgus. Understand you quite well."
"You understand nothing,"
Malgus said, and stepped into the room. Malgus felt the hate pouring off Adraas, the power, but it paled in comparison to the rage and hate roiling in Malgus. In his mind's eye, he saw Elena's face as she died. It poured fuel on the flames of his rage. Adraas, too, stepped into the room. "Do you think that your presence here is a surprise? That I have not long foreseen this?" Malgus chuckled, the sound loud off the high ceiling.
"You have foreseen it, but you cannot stop it. You are a child, Adraas, and tonight you pay. Angral is not here to protect you. No one is."
Adraas scoffed. "I have hidden my true power from you, Malgus. It is you who will not leave here."
"Then show me your power,"
Malgus said, sneering. Adraas snarled and held forth his left hand. Force lightning crackled from his fingertips, filled the space between them. Malgus interposed his lightsaber, drew the lightning to it, and started walking toward Adraas. The power swirled around the red blade, sizzling, crackling, pushed against Malgus, but he strode through it. The skin of his hands blistered, but Malgus endured the pain, paid it as the price of his cause. As he walked, he spun his blade in an arc above his head, gathering the lightning, then flung it back at Adraas. It slammed into his chest, lifted him bodily from the ground, and threw him hard against the far wall.
Is that your power?
Malgus asked, still advancing, cloaked in rage.
That is what you wish to show me?
Adraas climbed to his feet, his armor charred and smoking. A snarl split his face. Malgus picked up his pace, turned the walk into a charge. His boots thumped off the wood floor of the hall. He did not bother with finesse. He vented his rage in a continuous roar as he unleashed a furious series of blows. An overhand slash that Adraas parried, a low stab that Adraas barely sidestepped. A sidekick that connected to Adraas's side, broke ribs, and flung Adraas fully across the narrow axis of the hall. He crashed into a column, and the impact split it as would lightning a tree. Adraas growled as he climbed to his feet. Power gathered around him, a black storm of energy, and he leapt at Malgus, his blade held high. Malgus sneered, gestured, seized Adraas in his power, and pulled him from the air at the apex of his leap. Adraas hit the ground in a heap, his breath coming in wheezes. He climbed to all fours, then to his feet, favoring his side, his blade held limply before him.
You hid nothing from me,
Malgus said, and the power in his voice caused Adraas to wince.
You are a fool, Adraas. Your skill is in politics, incurring favor with your betters. Your understanding of the Force is nothing compared to mine.
Adraas snarled, started to charge toward Malgus, a last-ditch attempt to salvage his dignity, if not his life. Malgus held forth his hand, and the rage within him manifested in blue veins of lightning that discharged from his fingertips and slammed into Adraas. The power stopped Adraas's charge cold, blew his lightsaber from his hand, caught him up in a cage of burning lightning. He screamed, squirming in frustration and pain. "End it, Malgus! End it!" Malgus unclenched his fingers and released the lightning. Adraas fell to the ground, his flesh smoking, the skin of his once handsome face blistered and peeling. Again he rose to all fours and looked up at Malgus. "Angrel will avenge me."
Angrel will suspect what has happened here,
Malgus said, and strode toward him.
But he will never know, not for certain. Not until it is too late.
"Too late for what?" Adraas asked. Malgus did not answer. "You are mad," Adraas said, and leapt to his feet and charged. He pulled his lightsaber to his fist and activated it. The attack took Malgus momentarily by surprise. Adraas loosed a flurry of strikes, his blade a humming red blur as he spun, stabbed, slashed, and cut. Malgus backed off a single step, another, then held his ground, his own blade in answer to all of Adraas's attacks. Adraas shouted as he attacked, the sound that of desperation, filled with the knowledge that he was no match for Malgus. Finally, Malgus answered with an attack of his own, forcing Adraas back with the power and speed of his blows. When he had Adraas backed up against the wall, he cross-cut for his head. Adraas ducked under, and Malgus cut a column in two. As the huge upper piece of the column crashed to the floor and the balcony lurched above them, Adraas fell to one knee and stabbed at Malgus's chest. Malgus spun out of the way and rode the spin into a chop that severed Adraas's arm at the elbow. Adraas screamed and clutched his arm at the bicep while his forearm fell to the floor along with the column. Malgus had taught the lesson he'd come to teach. He deactivated his lightsaber, held up his left hand, and made a pincer of his fingers. Adraas tried to use his own power to defend himself, but Malgus pushed through it and took telekinetic hold of Adraas's throat. Adraas gagged, the capillaries in his wide eyes beginning to pop. Malgus's power lifted Adraas from the floor, his legs kicking, gasping. Malgus stood directly before Adraas, his hate, the vice closing on Adraas's trachea.
You and Angrel caused this, Adraas, and the Emperor. There can be no peace with the Jedi, no truce.
He clenched his fist.
There can be no peace at all. Not ever.
Adraas's only answer was continued gagging. Seeing him there, hanging near death, Malgus thought of Alina, of Adraas's description of her. He released Adraas from the clutch of his force choke. Adraas hit the ground on his back, gasping. Malgus had a knee on his chest, and both his hands on his throat before Adraas could recover. He would kill Adraas with his bare hands.
Look me in the eyes,
he said, and made Adraas look at him.
In the eyes!
Adraas's eyes showed petechial hemorrhaging, but Malgus knew he was coherent.
You called her a mongrel,
Malgus said. He removed his gauntlets, took Adraas by the throat, and began to squeeze.
To my face, you called her that. Her!
Adraas blinked, his eyes watering. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged.
You are the mongrel, Adraas.
Malgus bent low, nose to nose.
Angrel's mongrel, and you and those like you have mongrelized the purity of the Empire with your pollution, trading strength for a wretched peace.
Adraas's trachea collapsed in Malgus's grip. There was no final cough or gag. Adraas died in silence. Malgus rose and stood over Adraas's body. He pulled on his gloves, adjusted his armor, his cloak, and walked out of the manse.